exactly. So it's a pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Sharon Klein. Sharon is an associate professor of economics and a faculty fellow at the Mitchell Center. And as you'll quickly see, she's deeply committed to aligning work with the needs of communities. She draws on knowledge and tools from many different fields: engineering, climate science, economics, public policy, a lot more than that, to tackle complex challenges related to things like energy efficiency or solar power. And these issues, as you probably already know, and you'll hear more, this is just as much about people's household budgets as it is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to look at it from a lot of different angles. And her work also reminds us of the many important connections between climate issues and energy issues. We have to look at these together. Speaking of connections, there's also a great opportunity to learn from all the different climate and energy initiatives that are underway across Maine and certainly beyond Maine. But to do so, we're also going to need to focus greater effort on building a network of projects and partnerships. That's another place in which Sharon and her colleagues are bringing together researchers, practitioners, policymakers, people from the public and private sectors, NGOs, many others. And this was on full display last Thursday at the Augusta Civic Center as part of the Maine Sustainability and Water Conference that the Mitchell Center actually helps organize and host. That there was a day-long session that I'm sure she's going to be talking about that'll give you a better sense of who all of these folks are and what it means to work together on this. So please join me in welcoming Sharon to the Mitchell Center.
Thank you, David, for that nice introduction. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm going to be talking about an initiative, I guess is the best word for it, that's a couple of years in the making and feels like it's gaining some momentum. So I think this is the right time to have a talk like this. So what I'm going to be talking about is a local energy and climate action network, or what I call a LEAN. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean by that in a little bit. But I wanted to start with a little background about myself so that you know where I'm coming from. Because in this work, what I'm hoping to do and what other people are doing as well is bringing together people from different backgrounds. And so it's important to know where people are coming from and what experience they're bringing to the table. So as David mentioned, I kind of come to energy issues from a variety of different perspectives. I often call myself, when somebody asks what I do, I say I'm an interdisciplinary sustainable energy researcher and educator. That's a mouthful, but basically energy is my life. And I tend to study renewable energy and energy efficiency. And my background is in environmental science, engineering, public policy, and economics. So I draw from all of those disciplines and more when I'm trying to understand and help solve energy issues. I also am really devoted to community engaged scholarship. So here at a land grant university like the University of Maine, we have a charge to serve the public. And I've had positions in the past where I've been involved in serving the public. I was an AmeriCorps volunteer many, many years ago and did other types of volunteer service. So that kind of work is very near and dear to my heart. And I like to get involved in stuff related to that. So when I'm thinking about teaching, I'm thinking about how I can engage my students in important work that will have tangible applications to real people and the environment. So I often engage in community engaged learning or service learning. And then with my research, I'm often, wondering what kinds of questions people in different communities are asking, how the research I'm doing can help people and the environment. So something I've been really focused on since basically 2015 is this kind of umbrella topic of community energy. And so in 2015, I kind of started to try to understand what is community energy. There's a lot it turned out to be, one of those going down the rabbit hole type of things. And community energy can kind of be an umbrella term that covers a lot of different things. I'm going to give a couple of examples here, but what I was really looking at was, what does community energy mean in the renewable energy and the energy efficiency and conservation space? And early on, I published a paper with a former student of mine, kind of with the research that we had found at the time about what is community energy. And then I started to kind of go down a couple of different paths. First, I wanted to see, okay, now I understand a little bit more about what community energy is, but what does it look like in practice? So I developed a website with collaboration with different colleagues here at UMaine and some students, tracking projects that were happening around the country. I also started to do a deeper dive into community solar, which is actually another big umbrella term that covers a lot of different things, pretty much everything you see here and more. And then I also started down another path, looking more at what does it mean to do community energy efficiency. And this was another, welcomed rabbit hole where I got very involved with the nonprofit organization Window Dressers. I was really looking for a project that my students could do where they would be working with their hands to solve a sustainable energy project that was relevant to them and their community. And building these window inserts, which I actually brought a sample of, but I'll show you later because it's in my bag. I forgot to bring it up here. Yeah, you can go in the middle pocket. Yeah, that one. That's the one.
They'll usually get invited to
there we go. That's the one. Thanks, David. So window inserts are these pine frames wrapped in 2 layers of plastic and lined with weather stripping that you actually measure to be the size of the window, not a tiny little thing like this. And you just place them on the inside of the window to reduce heat loss. And so what's really neat about window dressers is they don't just, you don't just send them money and they make these for you. They actually work with a local community to coordinate a week-long window insert building workshop where people from the community come together and build these for themselves and for other people in the community. And so it's a real kind of barn raising event, which I was able to study from. And David, if you want, you can pass that around. Thanks. I was able to work this into my teaching by getting my students involved in coordinating these window insert building workshops, and then also was able to research it by estimating the energy and emission savings and some of the social value associated with these workshops. And so because of that, through that, I became on the board of directors of this nonprofit organization in 2018, and I'm still on there now, and I'll kind of explain where that fits in a minute. And then in the last more recent years, probably the last 2 or 3 years, I've really been kind of taking a closer look at energy equity and justice. When it comes to energy, this idea of equity and social justice is really centered around who has been, bearing the brunt of the fossil fuel industry and all of the negative impacts that has had on people and the environment. But it's also about who has access to and who is able to readily implement renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation options. So in that area, I've been working the last couple of years, mainly with the Wabanaki tribes, what is now considered Maine. And I started that actually years ago as part of the Future of Dams team. I was working with Penobscot Nation to understand how people make decisions about hydropower. And through those conversations, we would have discussions about what are some alternatives to hydropower for the people who were saying that they did not want that on the river. And so a couple of the options that came up were solar and energy efficiency. So when a Future of Dams, when that grant ended, I went back to some of my collaborators in Penobscot Nation and just had a conversation about, do you want to try to pursue some of these other options that you thought were good alternatives for your community? And that led us to a window insert building workshop in 2021, which was supposed to happen on Indian Island. But as you can see, it looks very familiar to this room. It happened right in this room because 2 weeks before the workshop was supposed to happen, the island shut down for COVID. So the person you can see there in the middle is Chantel Neptune. She's a Penobscot citizen, and she was the local coordinator for that build. And I helped support her organizing with her community, who are going to be the people who ordered the inserts, who are going to be the people who helped build them, and so forth. And we also were able to do this as a research project that was funded by the Mitchell Center. And so as part of that, I wanted to hire an undergraduate research student who was Wabanaki, ideally Penobscot, but even, I mean, you set out to do one thing and, you know, it would have been great to get a Penobscot citizen in this position, but I ended up with a Passamaquoddy citizen, Jasmine Lamb, and she has been unbelievably phenomenal. And not only did she do a great job on the project that we did, but she extended the work to the Passamaquoddy tribe. So we didn't actually do a window insert build there, but we did do research on preferences and motivations from the Passamaquoddy tribe related to alternative energy. And now Jasmine is the chair of a new citizen committee for Pleasant Point, where they are going to be doing a window insert build this fall and doing other community energy work and climate adaptation work as well. So that's just kind of a little bit about, I mean, there's a lot I can unpack there and you can ask me about it later. But that's just a little bit of what I've been doing and how I got to this point. So throughout all this process, I've been thinking about how there's all these different community energy projects that are happening across the country, across the state, and how sometimes they're not always well connected, or people are kind of recreating the wheel and you know, having to go through understanding different policies and rules and options, you know, from the ground up without a lot of support. So the idea of a local energy, and I put in parentheses and climate action network, because when I was first thinking about this, I was thinking about this from an energy standpoint, because that's what I do energy. But you'll see in a moment why I added the climate, and it should, you know, for those who understand energy issues, it should seem somewhat natural to add in climate, because energy has so much to do with climate change and trying to prevent future increases in emissions by reducing energy is a big part of the climate change work that we need to do. So when I'm talking about a LEAN, I'm talking about a network that actively supports on the ground projects through various different methods, peer-to-peer learning, information sharing, energy coaching, and so forth. And this idea really came from Vermont. Vermont has a really active, vibrant network called the Vermont Energy Climate Action Network, or VCAN. And you can see down at the bottom that they have these core initiatives where they have technical assistance, they have regional initiatives, they have network and communications, they have an annual conference. And I'm going to kind of take you on a little tour of what they do. So the VCAN unites all of these different energy committees that are in all of these different towns across the state. And there's a list of the energy committees, and you can even go on the website and you can search and find, you know, if you want to know if Bethel has an energy committee, you can search for that and then that'll come up, or Barnard there. And then you can click on it and find information, and you can find the person that you should contact about what that energy committee is doing. So it has information there so people can connect with each other. And then it also has resources up there about specific, you know, topics that are important to energy committees as they're doing their work. You can see up there, the Inflation Reduction Act is obviously a big thing right now. There's specific resources for municipal governments and so forth. And there's also a newsletter. So I joined their newsletter because I'm super interested in VCAN. And this is a sample of their March newsletter. And they send it every month. So it's like not too, in your face, but you get a little bit of information every now and then. And they talk about different in-person events that are coming up for different communities. They talk about different virtual events. I attended this one on thermal networks. I found that really interesting. And they've got funding opportunities out there as well. And then they have events. So they've got workshop series, webinars, a conference. And this is, you can look back and see all the different conferences they've had. They've had 14 so far. And I attended the one that was in, I think I attended in 2020 and 2021. So all this time that I've been studying and kind of teaching about energy, I've been kind of watching VCAN do all this wonderful sharing of resources and information. And it's been tangible too, when looked at through the view of my work with window dressers. So just to kind of give you an example about that, window dressers started in around 2010, 2011 with one workshop in Rockland, Maine. And over the years, it's grown pretty quickly. And this is where I got involved in 2015. I helped to coordinate the first UMaine workshop that happened in Bangor. And we had workshops in the next few years. And then, so this is where I kind of stopped tracking the different, communities that were out there in Maine. There were 29 at that time in 2018. But if you look now on the window dressers website, you can see that it doesn't just have Maine on there now. It has New Hampshire and Massachusetts, which are pretty small numbers right now. Window dressers is kind of just piloting some things in those states. But Vermont actually just started in 2019 with, it was going to be one workshop, but they were so excited about it that they did 4. And in just 3 years, that jumped up to 22 workshops. And at the same time, COVID was hitting, and so we can blame some of this on that. But the main workshops were declining. So where we had 29 workshops in 2018, I think this past season there were like 18 workshops in Maine or something like that. And I can tell you just, from direct experience with VCAN, that VCAN had a lot to do with this. And this is just one example of one type of community energy project. New Hampshire also has a LEAN, or Local Energy Action Network. It's called Local Energy Solutions, or NHLES is what it's sometimes called. They also have a newsletter. I haven't signed up for theirs, not because I'm not interested, just because I only have so much time. And they also have a list of their energy committees. They don't have it listed where you can just get in contact with whoever is leading it, but you can get in touch with NHLES to find that information. They also have events and webinars. They also have resources, like they have a strategic energy action toolkit on their webpage. And they also have a link to a conference page. So VCAN is really run by Johanna Miller. She's the person who kind of keeps this all together. But Sarah Brock is also very influential and important in this team as well. And you'll see on their website, they have a whole team of people. But I'm putting this up here because just so you know, the person kind of behind this in Vermont is really Johanna. And Sarah is interesting because she spans both networks. She spans Vermont and also New Hampshire, because she works in this upper valley region where the borders kind of blend a little bit. So I spoke with both. I've spoken with both of them over the years, and most recently in 2021, I had a conversation with each of them separately to just kind of find out, how was this LEAN formed, and what are some lessons learned? If we were going to form something like this in Maine, what would we need to pay attention to? And so some of the things that I learned through those conversations were that VCAN was formed in around 2004, 2005. First, this was like the first time that energy committees were really taking on kind of a grassroots action. And it started with one person trying to form a committee in one town. Vermont's unique because, compared to us and to most of New England, because it's a regulated electricity state. So there had to be a law passed to allow Vermont communities to have energy committees before they could actually start VCAN and have all of these different committees connected to each other. But now there's 120 plus town energy committees. And VCAN is pretty flexible with this. It doesn't have to be that like your town says we want to form an energy committee and now there's a municipally appointed energy committee. It could be that a group of citizens kind of from the grassroots up decide to form an energy committee and then they become affiliated with the town. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they have kind of a nonprofit organization or just a loose coalition, and they can also get support as well. And it kind of has like an informal structure. Johanna and the Vermont Natural Resources Council are really the ones that hold this network together. VCAN is actually one of VNRC's 4 main programs. It's the only program with 2 paid staff to support it. And for the last 12 years, they've had an AmeriCorps position that's in charge of communications, which is how they're able to do all the nice newsletter and all the other communications that they do. But they do have a challenge with turnover in AmeriCorps. Anybody who's been involved with AmeriCorps, and I've been involved with it, not just as a core member, but as a supervisor, it can be a challenge when you have somebody coming in and out of that position all the time, but not unlike having students, right? We here at the university know about. And then vital communities is also a vital part of this. That's the organization that kind of spans New Hampshire and Vermont that Sarah Brock is part of. And they were already doing all this really great work with their communities up in that area. And then VCAN just allows them to have more of a statewide impact. And also the regional planning commissions, there's 11 of those in Vermont. Those have also been involved in kind of helping to make this a network that functions well. So VCAN provides technical assistance, but as I mentioned, it's kind of this informal structure. So it's really what is shown on the VCAN support team page. There's like a picture of each member of the team and what they can provide, and people can connect with them for different resources they may be able to provide. And then Johanna did mention that rural and low income participation is a challenge with this network that they're actively working on. And that will become important as if, and hopefully when, Maine decides to grow its own LEAN as well. So the main partners in VCAN, as I said, are the Vermont Natural Resources Council, and then there's also the Energy Action Network and Efficiency Vermont, which is kind of, it's as I hear it, Efficiency Maine was built off of the Efficiency Vermont model. Now, Efficiency Maine may have something to say about that. That's just what I've heard in the in the area. So I think they've got some connections and some similarities. Vital communities, and then the Vermont Council on Rural Development. Those are the main partners that help keep VCAN running and what it is today. On the New Hampshire Local Energy Solutions side, this network started in 2010 to 2011, and it started as a local energy working group that started meeting monthly. It also started with one person in New Hampshire that was going town to town pitching the idea of an energy committee. And now it has more than 100 town energy committees. And they also have flexibility with whether they are municipally appointed or not. New Hampshire is not a regulated, they're more like us with electricity. So they have more flexibility with when it comes to what energy committees might be able to do. So the organization in New Hampshire that kind of helps to keep the New Hampshire Local Energy Solutions running is called Clean Energy New Hampshire. They kind of play a similar role as VNRC does in VCAN. So Clean Energy New Hampshire staffs the LEAN, and they don't So this was one thing when I was talking to Johanna from Vermont, she was like, oh, you've got to talk to Sarah from New Hampshire about how they do it, because they have kind of a more stable structure with staffing, rather than always relying on AmeriCorps volunteers and other volunteers. And they have more grant proposal foundation requests with funding baked in for community work because of this role that clean energy New Hampshire plays. So both people were kind of telling me to look at both of these networks as just to kind of see the best practices from each. And interestingly, New Hampshire Local Energy Solutions, they do an annual survey where they survey their different communities, and then they also feed back those answers to the communities. So there's this constant annual learning that's kind of baked in as well. They also have annual roundtable discussions, kind of continuing the how it was founded back in 2010 and 2011. And regional planners are also very important in this network as well. So there's quite a few more partners in the New Hampshire LES than in VCAN. They have a whole host of nonprofit organizations, starting with Clean Energy New Hampshire, which is kind of playing that role that VNRC plays in Vermont. Vital Communities is also a very important partner. And then there's others listed here that are also important partners. There's also utilities, electric utilities that are partners in this, and federal and state agencies. And also academia, there's a community college that's a partner. And there are businesses, for-profit businesses that are partners in this as well. So in 2021, I got a little bit of funding from a new initiatives grant for the Mitchell Center. And one of the things that we did under that with my research assistant, Wendy Crozier at the time, was try to start to catalog, like, are Vermont and New Hampshire the only states that have liens, or are there liens that exist somewhere else? So we just started a spreadsheet and started to detail everything that we thought might be a lien. And you'll see ag here because what I was thinking at the time was applying for a USDA grant to fund some of this work. And so I was really focused on the agriculture side as well. So that part, like cataloging what different states might be doing, was all kind of feeding into this question, like, do we have a network? Do we have this in Maine? Does it exist? Should we have it? And so I spent about a year just having different conversations with different groups, basically asking those questions. You know, I'd set up a Zoom meeting with different groups from state government, nonprofit organizations, local communities. And I would say, hey, have you heard of VCAN? Do we have anything like that in Maine? Should we? Do you want to lead it? What can I do to support it? Like, that was ultimately what I was doing. And around this time, and I'll talk a little bit more about who I spoke to during that year, but kind of in the middle of it, the Community Resilience Partnership started. And I actually spoke with people from GOPIF, the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future, about 6 months before the Community Resilience Partnership started, asking these questions about, do we have a lien? You know, is this something that's coming? And the answer I got from the people who ended up creating the Community Resilience Partnership was, yes, we definitely need this. No, we don't have it. And no, the state government is not the place to house this long term, because the state government, especially the governor's offices, will be changing depending on, you know, who's the governor at the time. And it would be good to have another type of entity that was posting something like that, so that if and when the politics change, it would be something that could kind of stand the test of time. But then the Community Resilience Partnership started, and I was like, once I started to get to know it, I was like, well, is this a lien? And I'll tell you a little bit more why it's not quite. It's a really good foundation for one. So what is the Community Resilience Partnership, for those who don't know? Right now, it's 131 communities that have been receiving funding from the state, from the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future, in the form of community action grants to support local climate and energy action, or through service providers who are getting funding to help those communities figure out what they want to do for climate and energy action. And there were 2 rounds of grants, just started in December of 2021. And so there were 2 rounds of grants in 2022 where communities and service providers could apply. $5.4 million total was awarded. And in the first round of grants, about 40% of those were communities with small populations and that were high on what is called the social vulnerability index. That is a metric that came out of Bowdoin College to identify some of those communities that may need extra support. And then in fall 2022, that population went up to about 66% of receiving that funding. And there are about 30 service providers in this partnership who are helping communities enroll in the partnership. So in order to enroll in the partnership, you have to conduct a community self-evaluation. You have to do a community workshop where you get members of the community together to talk about different local energy and climate actions, and then prioritize those for a government resolution where you then say, I want us now as this community, we want to be a part of the partnership, and we are going to do X, Y, and Z. And they usually want 3 to 6 actions that the community is going to do. So the service providers, you can imagine that there are some communities that are really set up well to just do this. They may have already done it. But there are many communities where they don't have the time to even read an email that talks about what the Community Resilience Partnership is. So the service provider position was designed by GoPIF to be a support to communities to help walk them through this exercise and help kind of do what they can for them, but also still get the community input and get the community prioritization so that government resolution will reflect the needs and the priorities of the community. And when this all started, and I was in the midst of looking at what is a LEAN and should we have one, I thought, what a great way to experience this partnership and understand, if this is going to become a LEAN, or if it's not, it could be great to get some experience firsthand about what this partnership looks like. And it also kind of fit with the work I was already doing with the tribes to try to make sure that the tribes were able to access these services, and the smaller rural low-income communities that are more north of Bangor. So in the first round, I applied for a service provider grant through the nonprofit organization Window Dressers because it really fit with their mission. And there's other reasons I can discuss later, but I ended up serving Pleasant Point, Indian Township, which are the 2 Passamaquoddy reservations, and then the town of Millinocket and the city of Eastport, which, if people aren't familiar with Maine geography, is right next to Pleasant. And then in the second round of grants, I ended up serving Penobscot Nation and the Holton Band of Maliseet. So at this point, I've helped to coordinate workshops for all of these communities except for the Holton Band of Maliseet, which will be in June. And the ones in green are now members of the partnership because we went through all of those steps and got their government resolution passed. And now they're eligible to apply for and receive up to $50,000 twice a year from the state, or $125,000 if they work with another community and do a partnership together. In this partnership, there are also regional coordinators, and these are, there's 4 regions that GoPIF divided the state into, and these are groups that basically are there to kind of help provide coordination within those different regions and help try to identify communities that may need service provider help, help people work together, help people find funding, and so forth. And they're pretty well connected to the Maine regional planning organizations. Sorry, I can't like see what my heading says there. Yeah, they're regional planning organizations. So if you look here, Region 3 of the Community Resilience Partnership is served by one of the regional planning organizations, the Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments. Region 4 is covered by the Eastern Maine Development Corporation. And Region 1 became a collaborative of multiple regional planning organizations in that area. And so GoPIF put out these 72 action items that communities can take if they want to, and then they can get these grants with no match. So that looked like a giant spreadsheet. And in my work as a service provider, I turned that giant spreadsheet, which is mapped to the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan. I turned it into something that I felt like in the workshops people could relate to a little bit more personally if they were members of the community. I turned it into 15 different themes like more efficient vehicles and shortened actions that people might be able to envision happening in their community. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through those quickly because that's not really the purpose of my talk, but I just wanted to see, you kind of get a flavor for what are the types of actions that GoPIF is incentivizing through their community resilience partnership. So we've got upgrading to energy efficient lighting, heat pumps, sustainable construction, tracking energy and emissions. About half of these actions are energy related, and about half of these are climate adaptation related. And so we've got protect and conserve land, protect and conserve water, improving community resiliency, which is really about planning, assessments, and management of different resources, managing flood risk specifically, and then protecting public health and engaging and educating the public. So I was able to narrow it down to 63 actions instead of 72 and shorten words. So what I would do is go out to these communities and present these ideas, talk to them about it, and then get their feedback about what they want to prioritize for their communities. And then from there, help them develop their government resolution. So a couple of reasons why the Community Resilience Partnership is not a LEAN is because right now, as it is, or through this past year, as it has been, it's mainly been a way to fund community projects. And then there are different peer-to-peer learning opportunities that are by region. So the regional coordinators will coordinate peer-to-peer learning in their own region. But there's been some uncertainty about, will there be more grants in 2023? There were supposed to be grants in March and September each year. And this year, first in November, we were waiting to see if how the election went. And then this spring, we've been waiting for the state budget to pass. So there's always a bit of uncertainty with people about whether and how this is going to continue. And then the networking so far has been mostly region by region. There hasn't been a lot kind of pulling people together statewide. That is changing. There's going to be a statewide conference in May that I'll talk about in a second. But it's also not the only thing going on. And so if we were to create the LEAN for Maine, I'm just putting this as NECAN because of VCAN, but you'll see that won't work in a second because somebody else already has that acronym. If we were going to do this, we could build it on the foundation of the Community Resilience Partnership. We could also build it on the foundation of other organizations like window dressers that are doing community level work all across the state. And the Sierra Club with their climate and community action teams that have been doing this kind of community level work across the state as well. MCAN is an organization that has been doing a lot of legislative work and state level work And so these are organizations that I've talked to. I've had these conversations of like, are you a lean? And I don't know about it yet. Do you want to become one? And so for all of these different organizations that you'll see that I have talked to have said, well, no, we don't quite do that. Like, so when I spoke with the people from MCAN, the response was, well, we don't get involved specifically with local projects and supporting local projects, but more kind of state level, trying to get legislation passed and raise awareness about big issues and that kind of thing. I may be characterizing that wrong, so you should talk to MCAN about exactly what they do. But the answer was, we would love to be involved in this, but we're not quite the organization that's doing that right now. The Nature Conservancy in Maine is also an organization that is doing great work. They've been a service provider, even though they're not getting the grants to support it in the Community Resilience Partnership. They've been playing a service provider role. The Natural Resources Council of Maine is also doing a lot of work in this space. Island Institute. The Maine Municipal Association is uniting all of the different municipal governments. The Center for an Ecology-Based Economy is this incredible organization out in Norway that's acting as a service provider and was acting as a service provider before the Community Resilience Partnership began and before the role of service provider was created. So they were already doing this work out there. A Climate to Thrive is another organization that has been doing that regionally over in the Bar Harbor area, and we'll come into this talk in a moment as well. The CCAP network, the Climate Change Adaptation Providers Network, we've got Parker Gassett there who's helping to lead that. And that is a community of people who are working on climate adaptation. Efficiency Maine is doing their rebates and helping to support energy efficiency across the state. E2 Tech is a trade organization that unites people working on clean energy across the state. We've got all of those regional planning organizations. We've got the Maine Climate Council, who's put out a roadmap for what the goals that we want to see in the state. Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is doing work related to this, public health aspect of climate adaptation. And then these are just to name a few, right? And I'm going to end, of course, in the Mitchell Center, because that's where I am here. And as a faculty fellow, we've been doing a lot here in the Mitchell Center as well that helps to provide the foundation for this. For example, in 2020, Mitchell Center researchers put together a report assessing the potential equity outcomes of Maine's climate action plan. It helped with the formation of the equity subcommittee for the climate action plan. And there's a community resilience workbook that has been produced by Mitchell Center researchers that really mirrors a lot the way that the Community Resilience Partnership is set up and has a lot of really good resources for that partnership as well. There's a new initiative that's looking at equity and justice issues under climate migration, where Mitchell Center researchers are working on that. And the keynote at the Maine Sustainability and Water Conference is actually the lead PI of this. But that's going to be looking at, for Maine, it's projected that people are going to be moving to this state because it may be more favorable for them as climate change impacts increase. And, thinking about what are the equity and justice concerns associated with that. And then we have at UMaine recently, Ivan Fernandez got this funding for a Maine Climate Science Information Exchange Hub. He's been doing a lot across the university trying to unite researchers about all of the different aspects of climate change. And then I just literally today found out about the Maine Climate and Agricultural Network, which is MECAN. So we can't use MECAN if we're going to build a lean. But this is another network that would be a piece of the puzzle in implementing this. And then I also talked about the networking priorities. So just to kind of get this rolling so we can get some questions. What I'm envisioning, and this is a loose vision, and it's not just my vision, it comes from all these different conversations I've been having with people, and most recently with Johanna Blackman from A Climate to Thrive, because Climate to Thrive has really launched this Local Leads the Way webinar series in the last year that has really started to try to bring together people statewide about these issues. And they're really excited about trying to grow this lean. And other people that I've talked to have been as well. But the idea would be that there would be this hybrid network approach where, there could be like the central organization that's helping to tie things together, but it wouldn't be like this star over here that this is the wheel and spokes. It would be more like a mesh, something in the middle that's kind of helping to keep it together. And it would be a coalition of multiple entities, ideally all of those that I mentioned and more, that would come together to co-develop a plan for this, share their time, their money, their staff to help make this and to run this. And that there might be a core group, there might be a big group of people who want to be involved in this effort, but there might be a core group of lead entities that would handle the daily operations, apply for grants, maybe even give out money to different local groups that need it. There would be communications like a website that stays up to date, a listserv, a contact list where people can go and find who they need to talk to, social media presence, a newsletter, regular events, an annual conference, topical meetings, webinars, trainings. Again, Local Leads the Way has really been doing a lot of this past year. And this past week at the Maine Sustainable and Water Conference, we brought together a bunch of people that have been active in the Community Resilience Partnership to see what all they've been doing as well. And so that's an example of the type of conferences. Now the GoPIF is going to be having a conference about the Community Resilience Partnership coming up. So this lean can kind of unite all of these different efforts together. And importantly, one of the things Johanna and I have been talking a lot about is having energy and climate coaches, paid staff who can go out to communities and really work with them. A lot of these communities just don't have the capacity for this type of work, and having somebody who can work with them one-on-one, not just in technical assistance, but like figuring out how they're going to develop a project, implementing it, and so forth. And one of the things we've also talked about is the importance to kind of walk this line between one of the things that the Community Resilience Partnership does really well is support local governments and tribal governments. But we often have citizen-led initiatives where there's a local government that isn't as supportive, and how you can help support citizens in getting to that status where they can make an impact in their community, even if they can't pass through the bureaucracy of the select board or town council or whatever it is that they need to get through in order to get the resources and the funding. And one of the things we envision for this network is that there would be a research component where the research would be participatory and it would help inform action, and the action would help inform the research. We're going really well with this idea of community engaged scholarship, and that this research would be transdisciplinary. So I'm just throwing up there a few questions, that could be answered with looking at a network like this. And we're going to be talking a bit more about this in a research meeting that I'm going to talk about in a moment as well. So yes, here we are, building momentum. This is where I'm going to end things. So we have a lot of ideas. There's a lot of people, a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And this is the time to kind of forge ahead and start planning this. So today I'm hosting a research meeting to kind of talk about those different questions I put up there and more what researchers are thinking about this. And then we just got awarded a Mitchell Center New Initiatives grant for this year. And so that's going to help support building this, this collaboration with A Climate to Thrive. They're trying to develop a conference for the fall that would be part of this, building a contact list of people who may want to be involved in this co-development of the network, and then having a meeting in June of all the people who want to be involved in co-developing this network to kind of start planning for it. There's a grant that I'm awaiting a decision on, and if it comes through, I might have some money to help support this. And there's additional funding applications in progress. So we're really kind of moving forward with this idea and want whoever wants to be involved in this to reach out and come to the different tables that we're offering. And that's it. Sorry, I didn't leave as much time for questions, but we have a few. So thank you.
Great. Sharon, I don't know how we can thank you enough for this fabulous talk and all that we learned from this. And while you were talking, of course, it's hard for you to see all the things that are going on in the chat, but people were talking to each other in the chat, answering each other's questions. So one of the questions that got asked was, do we have any towns in Maine with energy commitments? Never heard of this in Maine. And then so another person said, look at the Community Resilience Partnership led by the Governor's Office of Policy and Innovation, future GOPIF. And so it was really interesting. And that was just one example. People were doing back and forth. They are so interested in what you were saying and how we can learn together that they were already helping each other. So one of the things that just is so interesting about what you were saying is at one level, a whole lot of the theme was about networks and how important networks are. But another part of what you were demonstrating is how important one person can be in making a difference, because you're doing that. You're one person and you're making a difference. So how do we put those together? What do you think we should all be thinking about in terms of that?
Thank you, Linda. So I think that's the whole purpose of this network, is there are so many incredible individuals who are pulling together so many great things across the state. And it would be great for people to have access to them all in one place, you know, this one-stop shop where they could easily get in touch with whoever they need to, all of these great movers and shakers.
Great, that's great. That's really helpful. Another one of the themes that you were helping us think about is how many different people could be involved, how many different perspectives are important. You talked about building together things with students and communities and researchers. You talked about the importance of lots of disciplines. You talked about bringing people together from different backgrounds. You talked about how to engage students and citizen-led conferences and on-the-ground learning. What do you see as, if people said, well, okay, I want to get children and elders and adults involved, how do I do that? What would you say to them?
So that helps me remember one of the really important things that I think MCAN does. I believe that they have a strong program working with youth, if I remember correctly. But in any case, there are lots of different groups that are serving those different populations. And when you say like, how many can be involved, my answer to that, and people may differ. Again, this is just my vision for this, and I'm hoping that there will be a team of people who want to co-develop this together. But my answer is that I think everybody who wants to be involved and is already doing this work should be at the table. That's the way that we're going to have the most successful network. And so, you know, I know that the Aroostook County on Aging is working with elderly people. I know Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is often looking after elderly people. We have all of the different CAPS, which I'm forgetting what they stand for, but they administer the LIHEAP programs that help people with their fuel, and they're often serving the most vulnerable. And then we have incredible principals, administrators, you know, organizations that serve public education. So there's so many. And, you know, I think the idea is to try to get those organizations and those people who really have their finger on the pulse of their area, who can be involved in this and make sure that everybody is connected the way that they need to be.
Great, great. So we have one well, we've got a zillion more questions here. But
And I'm also happy to answer questions via email if people want to reach out. Linda, feel free to put my email address in the chat as well.
okay, great. And so if people, this fits in with sort of the last, question. So people can't follow you around every day, much as they would like to. How do they keep following all this good work that you're doing and figuring out ways that they might be an asset or learn from you? What are the steps by which they get connected to you in this work?
Well, I'll put a shameless plug for this is the Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions, because you guys, we have a newsletter or a listserv here, and a lot of people will keep tabs on what's going on with sustainability by being a member of that email list. So that's one way. And then we are, through this process to try to figure out a planning meeting for June, we're building a contact list for people so that we can keep that updated and make sure that people are kind of in the know. So if you're not already on communications from the Mitchell Center or from me, feel free to email me at sharon.klein@maine.edu, and I'll add you to that contact list and make sure that you hear the information. And also a lot of what the Maine Climate Council does and what GoPIF does, they have communications about their programs, about the climate plan and about the Community Resilience Partnership. So signing up for their newsletters also is a good way to kind of be connected.
Great. Can we give her a hand once more? We've run out of time.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you,
Yeah.
David.